In this video, we will discuss about network address translation and Palo Alto firewall. Normally, we call them NAT. So NAT means network address translation. Network address translation basically means to translate one IP address to another IP address. And normally these two devices do the network address translation in our network, router and firewalls. Normally you will see these two devices for network address translation. These devices play the role of agent between internet and private network. So if I go to our topology, so HQ firewall play the role of agent to translate this LAN subnet and DMZ subnet to the internet. So this is called network address translation. So this is a mechanism translating the IP address of the network packet. We call them NAT, or translate private IP addresses to public IP addresses, or translate one IP address to another IP address. We call them network address translation. Most of the time you will see it will translate private IP addresses range to public IP addresses. So we call them network address translation. But it can be private to private. It can be private to public. It can be public to public as well. But most of the time we use network address translation from private IP addresses to public IP addresses. So in our case, we have a LAN subnet with 10.0.1, which we want to translate them to public range. So for that purpose, we will use HQ firewall to do that job. So this is called a network address translation. And normally we use this NAT for internet connectivity to many LAN users over single public IP address. So here I have suppose 500 PC in my LAN, and they want to reach to the internet. To save the IP before public ranges, so what we can do, we can translate all these IPs to single IP, and this way we can save the IPv4 addresses space. So we can use for that purpose as well. Besides that, we can reduce the requirement of public IP addresses. Rather than to use public IP for every system, we can translate all system to single public IP address. Now keep in mind that normally we say this is we are doing NAT, but there is another type of NAT, we call them PAT. So it means these two are different things, but altogether we normally say NAT PAT. So network address translation and port address translation are different thing. Network address translation modify only layer 3 header, means only modify IP address. While port address translation, PAT we call them, so NAT PAT, normally we say NAT PAT, which modify both layer 3 and layer 4 header of OSI model. Because port address translation will translate the port as well. It can translate the source IP or destination IP and modify and translate the port as well. So in that case, then we call them port address translation rather than to call them network address translation. So these two things a bit different, but normally we say NAT PAT, either we call them network address translation. And also we can use this network address translation to hide the organization internal network from external. So nobody can reach you directly because they will hit from outside your public IP, and there is a firewall or router that will be hit. So these subnets are safe. So for that purpose, we can also use network address translation. So now we get the idea that we have a network address translation and we have port address translation. Then we say normally we use router and firewall to do this job, the network address translation. And the job of this network address translation is to translate one IP address to another. It can be from private IP addresses to public, or public to private, or private to private, or public to public. It can be any combination. It depends. Now coming to, there are mainly two categories of NAT. We have a source NAT and we have a destination NAT and Palo Alto firewall. So this is our internal network, and this firewall will do network address translation, and it will translate the traffic to the outside. This is the most cases we use network address translation. Now coming to the type of NAT which we can configure in Palo Alto firewall, I divide them in three categories. Even though this is source NAT and destination NAT, only these two are available, but I make them more clear, so I say U-turn NAT as well. So we have source NAT, we have destination NAT, and we have U-turn NAT. Now source NAT are further divided in three categories: static IP, dynamic IP, and port. Destination NAT is divided also in three categories: static IP, dynamic IP, port forwarding, and translation. And then we have a U-turn NAT, which is the combination of source and destination NAT and Palo Alto firewall. So when you go to NAT policy, you will find two places: source address translation and destination NAT. And when you combine both and both are configured, it means you are using U-turn NAT. Then in the source address translation, when you translate translation type, so you're gonna find dynamic IP and port, dynamic IP, static IP, and none if you don't want to do netting. So in the source NAT, we have IP address pool, we have static translation, and we have source port address translation. Similarly, in destination NAT, we have three type. Basically, I would say three type as two type. However, I divide them in three, which we will discuss further in the next video related to source NAT and destination NAT separately. So in firewall, we can configure source NAT, we can configure destination NAT, and we can configure U-turn NAT as well. So when you modify the source, we call them source NAT, and when you modify the destination, so we call them destination NAT, and when you use both together, we call them U-turn NAT, which we will discuss further. So this is all about network address translation. So if I go to firewall and you go to policies NAT, so here you will find these type of NAT. So when you click add and go to translated packet, so here we have source address translation. So we have dynamic IP and port, dynamic IP, okay, static IP, and you can put none as well. And similarly, in the destination, we have static and we have dynamic. Also, we have none, similar like in the source. And when you configure both, so it means you are going to configure, I believe, U-turn NAT. So we call them U-turn NAT in that case. So this was introduction to network address translation and Palo Alto firewall.